Hello, I'm John Generon, editor-in-chief of CorpGov. Very happy to be here with our friend Bruce Goldfarb, who is the founder and CEO of Okapi Partners. Bruce, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, John.
So, Bruce, let's just jump right into the heat of the moment. Proxy season is upon us. What's going on? Does it look different from last year?
Every year is different. With proxy season, every year you have a different set of circumstance. You have situations that are based on where the markets are trading. You have companies that are underperformers. You have activists who have identified situations where they believe they can create value. And so as we're right into 2024, we've had situations that were going to be underway that have already settled. We have situations that are right about to start, and it's going to be, I believe, as active as any year in the last 5.
Bruce, you and I were speaking yesterday about a pretty famous campaign, Darden, and what I remember, I was at CNBC at the time, and the world was shocked because they swept the entire board. And what I wonder is there still that fear out there that an activist can pull that off, or are companies thinking, that was just, I know it was almost 10 years ago, right? But does that kind of thing, is that still in the minds of your clients? Like, we might just lose the whole thing?
There's always a challenge when you are a company that's not meeting the expectations of your clients, of your shareholders, of your employees, that you are a potential target for an activist takeover. With that in mind, it is extremely extraordinary for a company the size of Darden and with the breadth and scope to have lost every seat on their board. You talk about being at that campaign, John. I was at that campaign. Ironically, it was in this hotel.
Wow.
The proxy fight occurred in this hotel.
That's right. They're based near here, right?
Yes, yeah. Darden is near here. And so we worked with Starboard. They took over the entire board, and they helped the management team with a board comprised of really great people with great experiences to bring best-in-class thoughts to Darden. And by the way, I work with Darden to this day. They are a great company, a great client, really good people. And I think what the managers at Darden and the employees at Darden appreciated was that extra nudge to move it up that one level. A real demonstration that activism can work.
Now, speaking of big companies, last year I think the big story was Disney. Is that still a rare occurrence? I mean, we're just talking about things that are unusual. I mean, you're talking about, companies that are 100 billion plus market cap. I mean, our friend Lawrence Elbaum was with us yesterday, and he was saying, look, one of the issues with companies that big is no one's going to buy them, for one thing, right? So is that, when your clients on the activism side are looking at targets like that, I guess if you're huge, if you're like Third Point or something, you have to go for the big guys, right? But is it still going to be kind of rare?
Well, it's certainly less common for large cap companies to be targets of a takeover. With that in mind, it doesn't mean that activists can't look at a large cap company and say, we can help you increase value for your shareholders. We can help you think about whether or not there are ways to recombine the assets, whether there are ways to work with the assets you have to grow the value. And that's what activism is about. And I think that's what the campaigns that Trian had announced are about. You hadn't heard Trian saying, we want the company to be sold.
Right.
In fact, I'm not sure that Trian campaigns have ever necessarily been about, we want the company to be sold.
Right.
Trian are operators, and they bring that mindset to bear in a campaign. Other activists will think a little bit differently about their campaigns, but what I find is the common thread among activists, and frankly, it should be the common thread among the management team, is what do we do to increase the value for our shareholders?
Gotcha. Let's turn this upside down and talk about the other end of the spectrum, the smaller companies. So some activists who we've worked with, so say Keith Rosenblum, Carlo Cannell, they look at stuff that's sometimes maybe 500 million less, maybe 100 million. My perception is that if I'm the CEO of a company of that size, I might might not think I'm on the activist radar, but they can be, right?
Most certainly, activism occurs more frequently in sort of small cap and mid cap companies, and there's a couple of reasons. First of all, the activists are able to take larger positions, even activists that don't have assets under management like Third Point or Trian or Starboard. They may have smaller funds, they may have come from larger funds, and they have the skill set, and they want to be able to take companies where they can acquire a bigger piece, where the other shareholders may perceive the value and can buy more of the shares. And sometimes there's a retail component with a follow-on for the activists cheering them on. But what's most significant in those situations, John, is that the activists can really make a difference. And those have almost traditionally been the campaigns. We see more small and mid-cap activist campaigns year over year. And that's going to be a very good trend. By the way, when you think about a company that's trading at 500 million, those may have been companies that within the last 5 years were trading for 5 billion.
Right.
And that's why those become the right targets. But the activist looks at those and says, is this really a good target? Is there value to be had? And those become the campaigns where the activists make a great case for change, and they end up with board seats, and they end up sometimes increasing the value by their action and by the directors that they bring on board.
Now, Bruce, I'm not sure that this is a big focus for you guys. It may be, but I want to talk about international activism. So something that my partner Jared and I follow very closely is the Japanese market, and I think that it's a consensus that they're a little bit behind in terms of governance, but at the same time, even if you get on the board, I mean, I'm thinking of T. Boone Pickens back in '85 or whatever.
Yeah,
they ignored him. Like he walked into the boardroom, they just ignored him.
Right.
So
right.
so is there? So what do you think about that? Is that changing, or is because I think at the Bloomberg conference where I ran into you about a month ago, I was shocked at the number of campaigns in Japan.
Well, international non-U.S. based activism is an area of focus for our firm. We just opened a London office in 2023. We've had demand from the client side, both for our investor clients and also some corporate issuers who have said, we recognize that understanding who our shareholders are, how they think and how they behave, considering that so many of the investors have a global focus and they're looking at best in class in terms of governance. There's high expectations for more transparency in the markets. That's certainly been an issue in Japan. I've worked on proxy fights over the years in Korea, Italy, Spain, Australia, Japan. And so that focus is going to certainly continue. And we're also finding that some of the largest hedge funds have gone international. They have offices in Asia, they have offices in Europe, certainly they're in London, and they're looking at companies who can benefit from the same kinds of thought process and value addition with new board members, with that concept that change can be created through being more active with the shares. And other investors are agreeing. What's really interesting is in the European market, the European investors have been very big advocates for environmental and social change, and governance has truly mattered all over the globe. It's growing in, say, some of the Asian markets. It was a little bit of a slow move, but it's, when you think about what did they say about bankruptcy, it was really slow and then really fast. And that's where I think we are with activism outside of the U.S.
Well, you're making me think of something. When I was working in London, there was a campaign with Nestle, and the issue was Nestle is like a Swiss national treasure.
Yep.
And it was, when I saw that, I thought, there's no way anything's going to happen there. Am I right in thinking that way?
Well, you do combat a certain mindset among some managers and some board members that a company can be untouchable.
Yeah.
With that in mind, you also feel the pressure from your investors, and ultimately even national treasurers want to perform well. I mean, if you look at the banking sector in the last couple of years, you had some national treasures in the banking sector that are now owned by other companies. And that really could happen in almost any sector in Switzerland. Exactly. And I don't think that any company truly believes that that the great ideas only come from within. And that's what makes activism interesting. That's what's going to make it fun again in 2024.
All right, well, we're going to leave it right there, Bruce. That was perfect. This is Bruce Goldfarb, a good friend of the program. He is the founder and CEO of Okapi Partners. I'm John Janarone, editor-in-chief of CorpGov, signing off from Orlando, Florida.